Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Drew here. Today is the first day of 5 on Friday, where I take 5 notable things from music, whether it's songs, albums, bad lyrics, or my favorite vocalists. Today is our first episode, and that's debut albums. There are plenty of great debut albums out there, and it's difficult to trim that list down to 5, so I apologize if your favorite records didn't make it onto the cut here. But what better way to get started than with one of my favorite records of all time, Two Door Cinema Club's Tourist History, a smash hit. Tourist History was released in 2010, and it didn't immediately circulate all that well, but it would eventually see charting success, and within 3 years of the release, it was actually certified platinum. But to really get a grip on what Two Door Cinema Club's debut was musically, you have to get a better look at the entire musical atmosphere at the time. This was the early 2010s when you had a lot of bands that sounded a lot like Two Door Cinema Club, creating a lot of music that sounded very, very similar. I believe the term landfill indie was coined about the bands of this genre or subgenre, which I do feel is generally unfair, but that's the musical atmosphere that we're talking about when we're looking at 2010 and tourist history. The majority of those bands and their albums really didn't hold up all that well over time, but Tourist History did, and it's not because it sounded particularly musically unique. Listen to any track off Tourist History, and it's not standing out on its own from most of the music that came out sonically. What makes Tourist History stand out so much is its excellent construction. It's only 32 minutes long, but that actually allows for the songwriting to show up in a big way in that you don't have any bad tracks and you don't have dead periods in the middle or at the end of a song where nothing is happening and nothing is being added to the album. That is to say that each track is sleek guitar pop with excellently executed hooks that do their job perfectly. Every sonic aspect of this album is engineered down to the most minute detail. The band's later works were certainly a mixed bag to say the least, most generally disappointing, but that doesn't take away from how excellent their debut album is. It's smooth, it's upbeat, it's catchy, and the tempo just never slows down. My favorite track has to be Eat That Up, It's Good For You. Moving on, 2019 was a really, really good year for pop music, and the most well-known debut album from that year has to be Billie Eilish, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?, which is an excellent record, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm actually going to talk about a record that was significantly overshadowed by Eilish, and that's Maggie Rogers' effort, I Heard It in a Past Life. Most people are really only familiar with Maggie from when Pharrell reacted to her track Alaska early on in her career, or from her collaboration with Phoebe Bridgers last year to cover Iris. But a lot of people do well to pay attention to her debut album, which is a beautiful piece of electro and indie pop with an impressively strong track listing detailing a young adult's reactions and responses to the world around her. Alaska has shimmering keys and a beautiful, breathy falsetto chorus, while Light On is a booming pop anthem with remarkable chorus construction. Most of the tracks were self-written and self-produced by Rogers, and especially in her older tracks you can really hear a folksy influence, which is where most of her musical history lies. Joni Mitchell does not feel like a half-bad comparison here. To paraphrase Pharrell, Maggie Rogers is one of a kind in the world of pop music. My favorite tracks here are Light On, Retrograde, Burning, and Past Life. The third debut album is one of the best psychedelic rock albums of the last 20 years and took MGMT from relatively unknown indie band to alt-rock icons, and that would be 2007 Oracular Spectacular. The album certainly rode to a lot of financial success on the back of its 3 hit singles, Electric Feel, Kids, and Time to Pretend, but the album has way more to offer than just those 3 songs. The album wasn't just a blend of neo-psychedelia and vintage rock with poppy hooks, although it absolutely was those things and executed quite well for the point of high praise. It was way more than that. What made Oracular Spectacular stick in people's minds was not because of the sounds themselves, but because of the meaning of the album. It was a view of a lens looking backward through time, watching yourself grow up, which was all too relatable for an entire generation of indie rock fans who the record resonated with deeply. Time to Pretend is talking about what the band wanted to be and what they wanted materially when they grew up, while Kids is more about the innocence and being naive as a child. The album is both sonically futuristic in its progressive nature while also vintage in looking back in nostalgia. It's also a very influential record as well. In fact, it's widely credited with pushing the indie and alternative rock scenes towards a much more electronic sound, while Rolling Stone actually marked it as the 18th best album of the decade. My favorite tracks here has to be Electric Feel, Of Moons, Birds, and Monsters, and The Handshake. Phoebe Bridgers rose to household name status in 2020 with her excellent LP Punisher, but it was her 2017 debut record Stranger in the Alps that I find to be the much stronger work in her discography. The record is a testament both to Bridgers' knack for using cuttingly clever humor and also to her ability to use storytelling in creating these incredibly emotionally bleak landscapes. References, influences, and homages are abounding through the record to her musical heroes. She name drops Bowie and borrows quite a bit from Elliott Smith. Motion Sickness is a fascinatingly hard-rocking breakup track, while Killer features incredibly solemn and chilling vocals over a simplistic, reverberating piano. Although the LP certainly suffers from a few low points with some boilerplate indie guitar tracks, it does end on a high note with a emotionally moving cover of Mark Kozelek's You Missed My Heart. My favorite tracks here are Georgia, Killer, and You Missed My Heart. And finally, a fifth great debut album, and one that seems to have flown under a lot of people's radars here in the last few months, is Not in Chronological Order by Julia Michaels. It certainly does seem to make sense that people wouldn't pay attention to the record. Michaels has been around for seemingly forever, releasing many singles and 5 EPs, but also this album came out 3 weeks before Olivia Rodrigo's album Sour. The similarities here are too significant to simply leave alone. Both Rodrigo and Michaels have similar voices and similar vocal delivery. Both albums feature love, breakups, and relationships as a central theme, and both albums open with a unexpectedly heavy pop-punk guitar number that is undoubtedly going to get stuck in your head. The difference here in the records, and the reason that I'm going to talk about and feature Not in Chronological Order as opposed to Sour, is simple execution. Julia Michaels has an astonishingly star-studded resume as a songwriter, writing hits for the likes of Ed Sheeran, Shawn Mendes, Justin Bieber, Selena Gomez, and Britney Spears, and it's that track record that really shines through on this album. The LP, which was made entirely in quarantine last year, really does tell a story not in chronological order when you look at the track listing. But I feel that ultimately its message, its central theme, is presented lyrically in track Little Did I Know. Little did I know that you would be the one that would save me, that would learn how to change me. Those lyrics and many others that show that the album is about Michael's relationship with not a singular person, but with love itself and how she interacts with it. Wrapped Around has such a strong new disco influence that it wouldn't feel entirely out of place on a Dua Lipa record. And All Your Exes has such excellent guitar work and beautiful lyricism that it's currently one of my favorite tracks of the year. Not in Chronological Order closes with That's the Kind of Woman, which is Michael's most introspective in an already emotionally weighty album, writing the last chapter of the album's story with the conclusion that Michaels does love herself, but she would love herself a lot more if her negative traits were to disappear. It's a fascinatingly good debut, and it's one of my favorite albums of the year. My favorite tracks are Little Did I Know, That's the Kind of Woman, and All Your Exes. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure and drop a like or a comment. I really appreciate those. If you want to see my next album review or my next 5 on Friday, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to follow me on social media, where I have a pretty active presence, you can click either of the links in the description below for Facebook or Instagram. Until next time. I'm coming for you, Fantano.